May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our salvation. Amen. This evening, we're singing 3 classic Epiphany hymns, at least. I hope you also think that they are classic Epiphany hymns. I have to think so because I picked them. But I think they are Epiphany classics. And they all focus, as does the rest of our service, on the Magi, the wise men, the 3 kings, the travellers from far away who bring expensive gifts and come to pay their respects to the newborn king. Each hymn, in its own way, takes the Magi as representing all God's people. That is, in the story, they stand in for us. And each hymn, in its own way, suggests that our response to the gifts that the Magi brought should be to come to the Christ child, bringing the gift of ourselves. So in the offertory hymn, in a couple of moments, we will sing, "With gold of obedience and incense of lowliness, kneel and adore him, the Lord is his name." We don't bring gold, we don't bring incense, we bring obedience and lowliness and adoration. And as we came in, we sang in rather more detail. Say, shall we yield him in costly devotion odours of Edom and offerings divine, gems of the mountain and pearls of the ocean, myrrh from the forest or gold from the mine? Vainly we offer each ample oblation, vainly with gifts would his favour secure. Richer by far is the heart's adoration, dearer to God are the prayers of the poor. That hymn suggests that it's not just that we don't need to bring gold, frankincense and myrrh. It argues that we shouldn't. Coming empty-handed to worship, bringing the heart's adoration and the prayers of the poor, is better. I'm not so sure. There's a long-standing theology reaching back well into the Hebrew Bible that one of the ways we're called to worship is by bringing the best we have to God. The Magi, wealthy philosophers, perhaps as later tradition has it, kings, brought gold, frankincense and myrrh, things of supreme value, to the child whom they knew to be born as king. The people of Israel, back in the wilderness, and then again in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, gave all their gold and silver jewellery to be made into the things of God, the vessels for the tabernacle and the temple. And over the last 5 years, thousands of individuals, perhaps even some of us here, have donated a total of 846 million euros for the rebuilding of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The Magi and the gifts they bring do represent us, as our hymns suggest. But one of the ways they represent us is by demonstrating that instinct that is still alive within us, that we need to bring what we have and the best of what we have to God. Now, our hymns are right that God does not need our material gifts. They're right that coming to worship does in fact mean coming with gifts, with our time, our effort and our attention, which we shouldn't underestimate. We are here in the dark and the cold when we might have had better things to do on a Monday evening. I don't know what's on telly, but perhaps it's better than my sermon, who knows? But our hymns are wrong to suggest that material gifts are not important. Over and over again, the Bible and Christian tradition remind us that we are, to misquote Madonna, living in a material world in which we are material beings, and within which the decisions we make about how we use our money reflect our wider priorities. When we bring our money as well as our time and attention, when we give to support the music of this cathedral, as will happen at the offertory in a few minutes, or when we give to buy flowers for our parish church, or when we contribute to a restoration fund for a grand cathedral or for a tiny village church, we are bringing gifts like the Magi to Jesus. Gifts that bear witness to how important the material world is to God. So important that Jesus was born into it as a material being. And gifts that bear witness to how important God and the worship of God is to us. We bring to God the best of what we have. Our time, our effort, our attention, our skills, like the choir behind me, and our material goods. During communion, I hope you'll be able to listen to the anthem which the choir are going to sing. This anthem will put us in the place of the Magi, entering the stable with their gifts. You've got the text on page 15 of your service sheet, but I think it's worth reading in full. Here is the little door. Lift up the latch, oh lift. We need not wander more, but enter with our gift of finest gold, gold that was never bought or sold, myrrh to be strewn about his bed, incense in clouds about his head, all for the child that stirs not in his sleep, but holy slumber holds with ass and sheep. Bend low about his bed, for each he has a gift. See how his eyes awake. Lift up your hands, O lift. For gold he gives a keen-edged sword. Defend with it thy little Lord. For incense, smoke of battle red, myrrh for the honoured happy dead, gifts for his children, terrible and sweet, touched by such tiny hands, and oh such tiny feet. The setting that the choir are going to sing was written by Herbert Howells in 1918, and it's clear, I think, that for him, the keen-edged sword and the smoke of battle red and the honoured happy dead are referring very directly to the First World War. But I think for Chesterton, who wrote it, they were less specific. She is writing about the weight of the Christian calling, about the fact that the gifts we bring are not always the whole of what God requires of us, and about the way that the gifts God gives us are indistinguishable from the work of discipleship that God asks of us. The poem always makes me think of the scene in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, where the children are met by Father Christmas, who gives them their gifts, which are tools, not toys. There too, the idea of gifts becomes something much bigger, not simply objects to add to the toy box, not items to enjoy and then discard, but equipment for the ongoing life of God's people. For the children in Narnia, as for us as the Magi in Chesterton's poem, these are weapons for a battle, spiritual weapons for a spiritual battle, and they are terrible and sweet. Terrible because they ask much of us, sweet because they are given by God and given out of love. Terrible because they are necessary for us to live in this terrible world. Sweet because they are an invitation to participate in God's work of making this world a better place. So as we come to worship this evening, may we bring the best of what we have, our time and effort and energy, our hearts and our prayers, our material wealth, to beautify God's house and bear witness to God's glory. May we trust that God receives whatever we offer and gives us gifts in return. And may we be willing to receive his gifts, his calling to discipleship, and his equipping to live the Christian life. Amen.